Welcome to the Kobo Writing Life Podcast, a podcast for writers about writing, publishing, and everything in between.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Kobo Writing Life Podcast. I'm Stephanie, your co-host. Today's episode features Julia Kent. She stopped by the Kobo offices and chatted with Chrissy Munroe about her writing and publishing journey. She had great tips for new and aspiring authors. So without further ado, here is the interview. We hope you enjoy it as much as we did. Julia Kent started publishing in 2013, and since then she has sold 1.5 million books, 4 New York Times bestsellers, 16 USA Today bestseller list appearances. She writes romantic comedy with an edge, and in 2013 realized she was making more through self-publishing than in a month of your day job. In a month than you did in a year at your day job. Yeah.
To be fair, I was underpaid.
Aren't we all? No. But you are, and you have that since then become the sole breadwinner in your family. You brought your husband out of his tech job.
My husband was a senior software developer in IT, in healthcare IT for Hewlett Packard, and so
potentially not so underpaid.
Right.
Yeah. So you are an official KWL superstar, and we are really happy to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So tell us about your writing journey pre-2013. Were you writing in your free time while you were working? What was your day job? Kind of get us to how you got started.
Yeah. Well, I've written for pay since I was 16. So I had a little column in a weekly newspaper in a town outside of Akron, Ohio. And I made $5 per column, 2 columns a week. And so I've been freelancing literally since I was 16, which was 15 years ago. I've done freelance writing for business, for websites, and then had been writing fiction most of my life just as this side thing. I would write short stories. I've half-written short stories. Wrote a novel at 23 that will never, ever see the light of day, not even as a new adult book. But really took off with business writing consulting in the late 90s with Web 1.0. And stumbled into SEO consulting, which is like a whole other topic here. But it turned out that fed my ability to do well with self-publishing, indirectly and directly. But the writing that I'm publishing now really came about roughly in 2008, 2009. I had been publishing creative nonfiction essays for quite some time, and have been nominated for the Pushcart, actually. So that was like a whole other era, back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And then in 2009, when the Kindle was just starting to trickle out we've heard of that, like Voldemort. But some of my friends who were writing business content and doing business consulting and writing online said, I pulled out my old short stories and I put them up on the A word. And I made a couple $100 a month. And then someone said, I pulled out this old romance novel that nobody would buy and I couldn't get an agent for them. And now I'm making $1,000 a month. And my interest was piqued because I thought, well, this is pretty promising. And at the time I was freelancing, and then I was working as an academic administrator at a university outside of Boston, and had been a professor for years and gone into administration. So I decided that I was going to write fiction again, and romance was the biggest market. And I'd been a history professor, so I thought, I can write a historical romance. Those are easy. No. So I read up on it, found out how you wrote them, and wrote one that broke every rule because I was going to break all the rules and do really well. No. And so it was under a dead pen name. And finally I couldn't stop writing funny and ran with that. And so in 2012, I published the first, it was a novella called Her First Billionaire. And it went from there. So that was kind of the journey. Back in 2009, 10, 11, the resources for self-publishing were just DIY, like find somebody's blog, go to Writers Cafe at Kboards, stumble through it and try to figure out. I mean, people were hand formatting. It was a totally different experience than it is now. I made every mistake that a self-publisher could make. Everything. I did exclusive content for some publishers and learned the hard way that wasn't for me necessarily. But then I've done other things that turned out to be great. So it's been just kind of crazy. So
amazing.
Yeah.
So you started self-publishing in 2013 officially, and
it was actually
11?
November of 2012.
Okay.
So I say 2013 in my bio because it's just easier.
Easier, yeah. And then how did that traction start building?
So I started out, the first 3 books that I put out were in the exclusive program we're not going to talk about. And I got all these emails from people saying, can I buy it on Nook? Can I buy it on Nook? Can I buy it on, mostly Nook, frankly. And I thought, well, if enough people want this, and the emails started coming in after the second novella had been out. So we're talking like January of 2013. And suddenly the third book came out and I got fan email that said, what's the next story in this storyline? And I was like, next? I was just going to put out 3 novellas. So I made her pregnant. She actually accidentally gets pregnant in this romance novel, and ended up writing a 4th book. And at that point, by the end of January of 2013, I was making more in a month than I was making at my regular job. I put out a 5th book and was wide at that point, completely wide, and made in March of 2013, that was the month I made as much in a month as I made in a year. And my husband, and we have a child who has special needs, significant special needs. He has apraxia and he has some GI issues. So part of my journey is that and this is a U.S. thing, this wouldn't happen in Canada. I'm not going to get political, but we were at the point where we were $50,000 in debt on credit cards. And keep in mind, my husband was senior healthcare IT developer, so you can do the math. And at that point, my husband said, well, look, you need to run with this. He needs you, our little one. And so that was when I quit. And then I got this idea right before I quit my job for this crazy book. And this never happens to author. Well, it rarely happens. I was driving on the highway one day, and this voice just kind of took over. And I went home and wrote 10,000 words of what became this book called Random Acts of Crazy, which I published at the end of May. And that book was a viral, took off on its own. I reached out to a few bloggers, but there weren't that many back then, so spring of 2013. And that book, in the month of June, it hit USA Today on its own. So again, none of the stuff that you can do now.
Yeah.
No Facebook ads, no Twitter ads, no network of 250 bloggers you can reach out to and hand sell to, no publicists in the sense that people use them now in self-publishing. And I made triple that month. So at that point I was like, I have a career, apparently. Like, this is it. And we were able to clear out all the medical debt, like all of it, which was amazing. And at that point, my husband started saying, I want to quit. And I said, wait a minute, this could be pie in the sky because, could be a gold rush. I didn't know in 2013 what it was going to be. Mm-hmm. And so he didn't quit, but he definitely took a sort of a different approach to his job. And anybody who works in software development, you know that it has become, in many, at least in the United States, in many sectors, a like 80-hour-a-week assumption that you'll be on call, that you'll take calls from international centers and whatnot. And so I wrote another book, and it did well. And so it's just, and meanwhile, I had been doing things that came naturally to me that I didn't really understand at the time other authors weren't doing. So for instance, my book description pages and my bio, I keyworded them. Now, lots of people do that now, but in 2013, I don't think there were many authors doing that. So you'll notice, like, even if you read the bio, it's a different bio now, but back then it was like, I made sure I mentioned hot rock stars and romantic comedy, and so I got those keywords in there. But I also did a lot of cross promo with other authors back then, and I mean, back then, just anybody who had a mailing list and who wrote something relatively similar. You write rock stars, I write rock stars. You write billionaires, I write billionaires. And we cross-promoted each other. It was, and then my husband was able to quit his job in January of 2014. Wow. And in the U.S., again, when you have to carry insurance premiums of $1,500 a month just to have insurance, the bar is a lot higher. So we're fortunate, and our son was able, because of self-publishing and my income, to get a lot of care that he needs. And he just transitioned into school. He's 8.5, and I'm not going to tear up.
Yeah, you got me there.
But
yeah,
I couldn't have predicted 5 years ago, that this would be the trajectory. So
awesome. It's hard to follow up. Honestly, it's really, really cool. So you very purposefully, quite early on, like you mentioned, your Nook readers, you set a path to publishing widely, and trying to gain traction at retailers, including Kobo.
Yes.
Why did you make that decision, and how did you make the switch? You told us, our team, that when you started with that plan, you were 70% Amazon revenue, and now it's down to 50 or maybe even less.
It's for 2017, it was 45%. In the first month of January, it's actually down to 35% because of growth on all the other vendors through some things I'm doing. That's not a raw, meaning my revenue is still up on Amazon, so it's not a net loss. Yeah.
So why did you make that choice, and how have you driven that growth?
So I made that choice, and it was a very deliberate choice. Right before NINC of 2014. NINC is Novelists Incorporated. It's a professional organization that runs a conference every year. That's where we met. Yeah. So I made a conscious choice, and it was more about watching the industry mature already, even in the fall. I mean, it's always maturing. But even in the fall of 2014, I could see that global growth, that I had readers in the UK emailing me. I had readers, I have somebody who buys all my books in Poland off of Kobo, and I had put some books into Amazon's KDPS program, and KU had just debuted in July of 2014, and I got a lot of pushback from readers. Why aren't those books available? Where can I get them? How can I get them? And it was the pain of that, of dealing with that, of trying to explain it, became onerous enough to say, all right, I think it's time to take this up. But more than anything, my husband had quit his job, and we were fine. Everything was fine. But I'm risk averse. You wouldn't know it. I also am experimental. But I said to myself, okay, well, how do you mitigate risk? You diversify. All right, what's the best way to diversify? I'm gonna go wide. And I never had the hyper concentration of revenue in an exclusive program that there are some authors for whom going exclusive is the way to go. But I never had that. I didn't have that hyper concentration. And so I went to Novelists Incorporated's conference in October of 2014, determined to shake the hands of the reps, to meet them, to see what I could do to help them grow, and to, of course, see what they could do to help me grow. And I had some amusing moments, because that's where I met. Did I meet you in 2014 or 15?
I think 14.
I think so, yeah. There was one point where I was sitting in a panel, and somebody whispered that I'm going to say another retailer's name. The iBooks guys were right behind me, and I literally turned around and went, "Hi, I need to get on your schedule." You know, it was that kind of thing. And when I met with you guys, and with Kobo Writing Life, I've been part of Kobo Writing Life from way back. I didn't use if I used distributors, it was like Smashwords. Did you guys use back in the day?
Yeah. 2011.
So I knew that I could try to work on getting more promo and work on, even doing simple things. I always made sure that I linked to books on Kobo, on Nook, on iBooks, on Google Play later when I joined their program. A lot of people don't. You'll see people choosing to only post links in social media to Amazon. And so for me, it was a hard long-term business decision that I made, because it was kind of white-knuckling it at times when I had friends who were having six-figure months exclusive to Amazon, and I'm sitting there, looking at my revenue on all these other places, still doing well, but thinking, have I made a mistake? And now I know I didn't make a mistake, but it took that sense of, okay, this is what I'm determined to do. But I also combined it with learning Facebook ads intensively, experimenting with Twitter ads, I've experimented with almost all of the ad platforms. But one of the key factors, I think, in being able to go wide and stay wide are getting BookBub featured ads. That's been huge. Getting direct promotion from Kobo. I remember the first time I emailed Shayna and said, "I heard there's a list that you can get on for some promo. I would love to be on that list. I'll make." And then I followed it up with all the promise. "I will tweet you. I will." Please, just take one of my books. And and I remember as my books started to get promoted by Kobo, I could see on my dashboard, I could see my sales revenue climbing, and then it led me to reach out. And I grew up in the Midwest. We were talking about this earlier. Turns out we grew up fairly close to each other, and so I had to get over the nice factor, the oh, I don't want to bother them, or well, maybe I'm asking for too much, and just to ask. And so I developed those retailer relationships, and then I started to really drill down and analyze data, and to look a couple of times I've run Kobo Netherlands ads, and this was before Kobo Plus, and was like, okay, my growth is I don't know what it was, and that led me to do that, but why not experiment, even if it's tiny? Why don't I see what's possible there? And so that's been kind of a short version of my wide journey, but I have the ability to survive off of our non-Amazon income quite happily. I mean, I want the Amazon income, but would love to be able to live off our Kobo income. Not there yet. We live outside of Boston, which I'm in. You guys have an even higher housing cost market here than we do, so that's rare for me to be somewhere like that. But anyhow, I'm now very pleased with my decision, but it has been very hard to watch other people, and comparison
is really tough, especially when authors are very outspoken about their earnings on a weekly, monthly basis. It's super hard, but two big takeaways: have your business planned, and it takes time for sure. Yeah, you're a great example of that. So what does your business team look like right now? We're looking at it.
No, I'm so it's in the beginning, my husband, when he quit his job, had all these promises, and I love him.
No comment.
And I love him dearly, and he's great for correcting formatting, or back before Vellum. I now use Vellum, which is a piece of software that makes formatting unbelievably easy. But he was my formatter, he was my techie, and he was my sort of algorithm analyzer. Like, he was the guy who could look at what was in front of his face on a retailer's page and make some guesses about things like also bots or how things were connected. He also took over the entire household. He runs the household now, and happily. Like, it's been great. It was a transition because I had to let go of how I do things. But he eased out as he started to work on his own project. He's about to launch. He's an AI developer, and he's about to launch something I'm not allowed to talk about. He even made me sign an NDA. But I was like, "You're Amazon. Like, you're making me sign an NDA." But so now I have a wonderful, amazing virtual assistant, meaning she's in Florida, I'm in Boston, so she works with me, and she handles so much. She handles review teams, ARC distribution, booking, ads. I'm gonna run out of like thoughts about what she does because she does so much for me, and so I work with her. I do all the formatting now, almost all the formatting myself because of Vellum. But for some of my print books, there's a wonderful Canadian formatter I work with. She's in the Yukon territory, so yeah, pretty cool. But I work with cover designers, one of whom is in Singapore. So it's very global. Mm-hmm. The industry itself is global. So one of my cover designers is in Kentucky. One of them, I have no idea where she is, actually, now that I think about it. Nowicki Productions, I don't know where she is, but she's great. And then I work with audiobook narrators. So I've expanded into audiobooks, and I've done self-published translations into German and French, which is its own animal. And so I work with translators who are all over the world. But I have probably about 25 to 30 freelancers that I work with, and not necessarily consistently. Yeah. I try to find people who are good at the thing they're good at, and then only use them for that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of stuff doesn't get done. It just doesn't get done. And I learned, 2016 was sort of my year of the experiment. I tried to expand in the sense that I tried to follow what I saw some other authors doing, and had some great people I worked with, but it turns out it just wasn't the model for me. And so it led to, I produced fewer books. And I'm very prolific. I love to write.
Mm-hmm. What does that mean for you in a year? What's prolific to you?
So I write about 800,000 words a year. I publish about 500,000 to 600,000 of them. And I generally put out between 9 and 11 books a year.
Okay.
So by prolific, and so even on the flight here, I wrote 3,000 words.
So NaNoWriMo is hilarious for you.
Yeah. I did NaNoWriMo one year in, I don't remember what it was.
2 days.
It was 11. It was like 11 days, and the only reason it wasn't faster was something happened. I binge write. So I'm a binge writer. You hear about people, plotters and pantsers. I don't know if anybody. So plotters are people who outline everything, and then they steadily write their 2,000 words or whatever their goal is every single day. And pantsers are fly by the seat of your pants, and I'm a total pantser. And I think that's part of why trying to assemble a larger team before, because I'm the person who we have this lovely. My assistant is like, so are we actually following the monthly plan from the annual calendar this month? So I can be like herding cats.
Yeah.
But that's I want to. My goal for my business is to get to a point where the writing comes first, and it really should. Yeah. It really should, but you have to. We're publishers. We're not just writers who happen to sell books. So the publisher hat has to go on. Yeah. And so finding that balance is what everybody in the business is trying to figure out. Yeah. And
so what is happening in the indie publishing business that feels really exciting to you right now?
Audio. Oh man, the potential is so big. And I have 17 audio titles that I've done that are non-exclusive. And this is another one of those white knuckle moments, because for the last 6 months, a lot of people I know are making choices that aren't non-exclusive, and I'm sitting there going, oh, am I doing the right thing? And I hope that a few years from now I will be as happy with my decision as I was with my ebooks. But audio, I think, is huge. I think translations, depending on the subgenre, my experience with self-published translations has been fairly smooth. Well, no, that's not quite right. The results have been okay, is the best way to put it. The process was a whole other thing until I could find people that worked well for what I was aiming for. But I think those two are definitely the future. I think that you're going, well, I think that what excites me, I should be careful about, I'm not making a prediction, because you're asking what, I was about to start making predictions. And I don't want to do that. What excites me is more and more retailers are upping their game. And as an indie, that is so exciting. So last week, or was it last week or the week before, there was the announcement about Walmart and Kobo, Rakuten combining, or not combining, but
new partnership,
combining forces. But at the partnership, at the same time that Google Play announced audiobooks, and there was the Kobo announced, you've had audiobooks for longer. And there was some other announcement, and of course now I'm blanking.
iBooks shifted their store.
That's what it was. Thank you. And it was just, you could, if you could have heard the cheering in the indie subgroups and forums, it was, loud. So just so you know, there was a lot of cheering going on. And there were the negative Nellies, but I call them the Chicken Littlers. and I just tune it out more and more, and that's not to say that I'm a Pollyanna, but it's more, well, okay, if you have a good point, then I'll listen. But the negative stuff, it's like when, quite frankly, people will say, nobody sells anything on Kobo. And I'm over there looking at my revenue going, okay, that's, if you want to think that, that's to your detriment. Or free doesn't work.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. Yeah, can we go into that for a little bit? In the context of this series, I read the first 2 books in the Shopping for a Billionaire series. The first is more of a novella. Yeah. And then the second one is also free. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like a 0.5 and a 1 in the series. Yeah. Like, come in. I really liked them. I was so surprised. It's interesting. I hadn't read you before, but I had met you personally. So it was interesting to see your writing voice versus who you are, as I know you as a person. But it's very Bridget Jones, Sophie Kinsella, beach read. It's a really fun read for those of you who haven't had a chance to get into this series. I thought it was really fun. It's a character who's a secret shopper, and I think the romantic comedy with an edge. Do you want to give the background?
Do you guys know what secret shoppers are? Mystery shoppers? Okay, all right. They're people who go essentially undercover and do customer service evaluation for retailers and businesses, doctors, banks, and the employees have no idea that they're secretly evaluating them. Yeah. And so that was the premise. And I did that when my kids were little on the side for I did it before I even had kids. I did it for fun because you get free stuff. And when you're broke, that's great. Like a free dinner out was and then I worked my way up to hotel shops. And so I did some of the luxury stuff, and I also did the 9 bagel stores in a single day, dragging a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old along. So I, just so you know, I actually did some of the stuff.
You are that bagel tester in the first book.
But I did meet a billionaire in the men's room.
Did you have to evaluate the men's room?
You actually had to evaluate the urinals for cleanliness. Yeah. So it's... Sorry. Yeah. So, yeah.
But yeah, they're really great, light, fun reads. What motivated you to put them for free? As an author, to give away your work? I guess you'll give the counter argument that you're not giving away. Can you talk about how you calculate the value of free to you as a business, on the business side of it?
Sure. I view it is Costco up here in
Oh, yeah.
Canada? Okay, so you go to Costco and they've got all of the free samples, right? And so you eat a shrimp puff, and $12.99 later, it's in your cart, right? I think of my books that way. Now I'm prolific. I have 50 books out.
Yeah.
So it's somebody with 2 books that they would have a different calculus, but my calculus was, let's give people a sample, and if they like it, then they're willing to take that leap into actually spending their money on it. Do they find value in what they're reading? And so with the Shopping for Billionaire series, I put the first one free. I think I had 5 or 6 books in the series when I first decided to put the first one. And the first 5 are novellas. And that's its own weird little story. I didn't plan it. I never planned this series. And this ended up being my biggest series so far. I was invited to do a charity box set and needed to come up with something that was snappy, fun. And Brenda Novak is an author who does this, or she does these charity box sets, and we raised $100,000 US for diabetes research. Her child has juvenile type 1 diabetes. And so it had already been in the hands of 50,000 readers. And so at that point, so then I put it up for sale and put up, the second novella, but I had a publishing schedule already planned. So I thought, okay, I can write 20 to 25,000 words and keep this going. And by the 3rd or 4th one, it was really obvious that people wanted more and more and more. And so then I started to really plan the whole thing out. So books 1 through 5 are novellas, 6 beyond are full-length books. But so once I had 6 books, 5 books, I decided, all right, I'm at the point where the value of giving away a free book now is there's a formula for this, where you figure out conversion rates from the freebie to the paid, and then all the way down the line, how many convert from book 3 to 4, or 4 to 5, and so forth. And so I turned that one over to my developer husband and said, create a formula for me. And he said, I need all your data. And I said, here are all the, for Kobo, I was like, here are all the Kobo spreadsheets, but we don't know what the free numbers are. But we figured out roughly the value of how much I could spend for ads to get one freebie downloaded. And we went from there, and so I started taking out ads and targeting each retailer when I did the ads. And I couldn't get a BookBub featured deal on this because it's a novella. And although it's longer now, I've actually added content to it. So BookBub, you could pick it. But once I set it free, it just took the whole series off. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize first 5 books. I was reading some of the reviews, and it's so funny. People, number 1 is the free books. Like, what are you complaining about? Yeah. Number 2, it says novella, and it says how many words it is. They're like, it's so short. How could you even call this a book? But most of the reviews are quite outstanding, and it's a really fun, easy read. Highly recommend.
And it's funny because it is one of the pitfalls of setting a book free. You get 1-star reviews because I don't like books with cliffhangers, or I don't like unfinished books. I'm putting this author on my do not read list. It's like, I just gave that for free. Yeah. And so you take the chance that you're going to alienate some readers. On the other hand, is that the reader I'm trying to acquire? Right. Because part of it is about reader acquisition.
High value readers.
Yeah. And so and you will hear arguments against putting any book free from some authors, but by and large, it is of huge value if you have a longer series, especially.
Very cool. So hopefully that gives everyone some context to Julia's journey and all the amazing things you're doing. Any questions from the Kobo crew? Nathan's the director of our merchandising team.
So I had a question about your early, you mentioned going to history professor. I can write all the time. Great. Books happen. And then you mentioned discovering that you were funny. And it sounded like you sort of struggled with that, like you kept like trying to push the funny away and like write a proper book.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a bit about how did you just let the funny in?
Yeah, so I was writing. So the book that I actually may dig it out and clean it up and put it out there just because,
Never
but
say
not
never.
not as a Julia Kent book. It was a reincarnation romance, and so I have this couple that gets reincarnated 100 years later, and this is so first book. It was all about I think it was 2011. They're history grad students, write what you know, right? And I kept having the characters. So the characters in the past weren't funny at all because they die. But but the characters in the present. Oh, I didn't mean spoil it. But
You did say reincarnation.
but I kept having the characters make these sarcastic, funny comments, and it almost became a little over the top for a contemporary historical romance, reincarnation romance. See, I can't even pick a genre, so you can't market this thing. And so my husband he's my first reader, by the way. He's my alpha
awesome.
reader. He reads everything that I write, and he gets offended. I tried to take him out of the process because he's at one point he wanted to distance himself from the business. I was like, okay, I'll just hire somebody else to read. He's like, no, yeah. So he was the one, actually, who was like, you're funny. Why don't you write something funny? And but that is its own issue, though, because you don't sit down and go, okay, engage funny, until you're on your 13th book going, I got to be funny. So it really was an evolution. So it became, I sat down and decided, okay, I'm just going to let it come out. Like whatever happens in the next book that I start. And so when I wrote Her First Billionaire, it's about this woman who meets these two billionaires and ends up in a relationship with both of them. And the reviews on that one have been very interesting. 5 or 1. 5 or 1. And so I opened it with her on an online dating site. And that's how my husband and I met in 96. Yeah, love it, AOL. So I actually started with remembering opening up the dating site and going, what do you write? Like, how do you describe yourself in 50 words and make sure you don't sound like a freak? So, and there were no, so anyway, so I sat down and I decided, okay, she needs a best friend because my best friend was sitting there. So it was a little bit of real life, but I'm not married to 2 billionaires. So at that point I was like, okay, what do I think is funny? Like, what do I think was funny about the journey? And just went from there. And now when I write funny, it's more about finding the humanity in the character, and then finding, I don't even know, finding what is amusing or ironic. There's a lot of irony in comedy. You have to sort of set scenes up. Writing rom-com now is it's intuitive. Like it just kind of comes out. Yeah. But the evolution from, okay, I'm going to write a historical reincarnation, intellectual book with a heroine who's getting her PhD, is moving from that to mystery shopper who drops her phone in the toilet and the billionaire finds her was more about, all right, what's funny? What do I think is funny? And this series has some very serious parts to it, and that's one of the other things. I don't write. It's not you haven't hit the serious part yet. It's in the third one, but comedy comes from. I mean, that's just like everything else. Comedy comes from the darker moments. If you can't laugh at some of the worst things that we go through, then it really takes the edge off our humanity. Yeah. So. I don't know if I answered your question, but it was more like, okay, what's from the inside coming out rather than outside, structural thing. So.
I did want to know, speaking about the reviews, being self-published, you get to be a lot closer to your reader than traditional publishers. like you can respond to everything from like price demands to what they're asking for from the series. How has that whole part of your writing journey evolved, and like how closely do you connect with your readers? Do you have readers that you're actually friends with? Do you talk to them online? Yeah. What is that experience like, being the person who's the content creator and the publisher?
I'm super, super active. Facebook is my thing, so I'm old. But my kids are like, whatever, Mom, you need to be on Snapchat. No, I don't. And whatever other things they're on. I know they're on all kinds of different things. But no, I'm very active. I have a Facebook, I hate this word. I hate the word fan, but reader group. There are about 5,000 people in there. And I'm in there every day, at least posting once a day, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. I post on Facebook on my regular business page and my profile. I post funny little stories about my life, and so my husband has a pen name. We call him Clark. Clark, and so Clark Kent gets to be featured in a lot of little funny stories that I post on Facebook. I interact with people at book signings. Barnes & Noble, I got to be the first self-published author to do a Barnes & Noble signing in Framingham, Massachusetts, which was amazing and fun, and I'm planning to do more, and they're eager to do more. And so that was nice to do a bookstore signing rather than, I mean, not that the book signings I do otherwise are any less wonderful for fan engagement, but I do book signings. I don't do as many as some self-published authors do. I have newsletters where I talk about my life, but I have boundaries around it, so no one knows my children's names, although I said it earlier.
We can edit that out if you want.
I don't show pictures of my kids unless it's in profile covered, and it's not that I'm that worried, but I'm careful. I'm cautious. But the fan engagement has been organic. And that's the thing. It's not fake. I'm not creating some persona. I really do love coffee. I literally am here. I have a Burr manual grinder and an AeroPress in my hotel room. And I have my Barrington Roasters Gold. Like, I love coffee, and that comes out in all kinds of jokes that I make on Facebook and in my books. And so the billionaire bought Shannon, his wife, a coffee chain for their wedding, and that has nothing to do with wanting to be able to deduct all my coffee expenses. But it's the fan and reader engagement is pretty high for me, and I like that very much. Every so often, it's not so fun. I have readers who occasionally want to tell me how to write my books, and I have readers who occasionally express their extreme displeasure with my books in general. I've had the typical not so great fan mail, and that gets archived. And I don't generally respond like if I get a really bad review. I don't let my emotions dictate my business decisions, because that's a business decision. Screenshots are forever, and so even if I'm angry at being told that I'm going to hell for writing what I'm writing or whatever, I just archive it and move on. And the only time I've ever responded to a review is that someone had a corrupt download on a retailer, and that's not my fault, but you gave me a 1-star. Yeah. And I just very nicely said, hey, email me and we'll fix it for you and we'll get you that file. And that person came back and changed it to 5 stars. So there's a way to engage on the negative books that, but you do it on a business level. But yeah, I have, I really enjoy, I haven't become friends with any of my readers, but I have definitely stepped into, there are a couple of people local to me who at times I think I would actually love to go out for coffee with them. But I haven't taken that step yet because, frankly, my personal life, my kids are, I have a senior who's headed off to college, looking at a school in Canada.
Hey.
I'm like, please go to Canada. So I have an excuse to go to Canada all the time. And then I have a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old. And so they keep me busy. So I try to keep business and personal. But
Yeah.
I do have a number of author friends. And that's been one of the biggest perks of this industry. You meet someone at a conference in, I don't know, wherever, New York, and then you discover that you live 25 minutes from each other. So
Yeah.
that's Daisy Prescott.
Other questions? Hafsa, are you thinking of one?
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it. You mentioned that you, especially with something like SEO, you did a lot of things that other authors didn't do back in the day. What are some of the other things you did other than keywords?
I had a newsletter, which everybody has a newsletter now, but in November 2012, and I also my Facebook page, I opened it up like in January of 2013, which a lot of authors back then were like, oh, this Facebook thing, I'm not doing that. But the newsletter, and I remember preaching to the choir, or not preaching to the choir, the opposite, like begging people to open up a newsletter, start collecting addresses, because even 17 people, maybe 10 of them will buy your book, which was, when you're starting out, that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a very engaged newsletter fan base pretty early on, and then it was all organic at the time, and very focused on making sure that it wasn't just, hey, buy my book. It was funny little stories or excerpts, or a book would be up for pre-order, and I would send things that are conventional now, that are just standard in the industry. I also started doing swaps with people, like, hey, you have a book out the same week I have a book. Let's put each other in the newsletter. I started doing newsletters that were titled Nothing But Freebies in here, and I would feature all my friends' free books. And it was, I did one time at the end of the month that said, not enough paycheck, but still want to read, which is, but I would, so I would feature the freebies, and everyone would get sell-through. And I have to confess, I got affiliate income from any of the sales that came from that. So, because some retailers, you can make money off of whatever else people buy other than downloading the freebie. Some of the earlier stuff, it really was author cross promo, and to be intellectually honest, I don't know if that's the right phrase. A lot of those things you can't do the same way now. So just plain old doing an author swap, a newsletter swap, with the way that also bots work, or the way that algorithms work on various retailers. In the past, I might have promoted somebody's super dark erotic romance. Well, I don't necessarily want that in my also bots, or to be connected. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but a funny rom-com and a dark romance really aren't gonna work together well. Where back in 2013, it was just about any promo. Mm-hmm. When Random Acts of Crazy took off, I got an agent, because I thought I was going to sell books, because in 2013 that's what people thought you did. You sold to trad pub, and he asked me over the phone before he took me on. He said, so what was your promotions budget for this book? And I said, $70. He was like, what? So again, stuff that you could do back then, you can't do now. But I have to say, cross promo, keywording, and my newsletter back then were major.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Tara?
Just to follow up from that then, if you were starting out now, like what sort of advice would you give a self-pub if it doesn't really quite have the edge that you had back then?
Yeah, man. It's funny because I get that question, and I don't know, because I'm not doing it now. I think now it's a lot harder to do it on a shoestring, like a lot harder. I think that the standards are different now. My husband made my first covers.
Wow.
Literally bought a picture on iStock Photo, and he went into GIMP and because he's one of those Linux people or whatever. And he was, yeah. So he did the first covers, and he did the formatting, and I have author friends who did their own covers and did their formatting back then. Now
You can't get away with that.
yeah. There are cheaper cover designers out there, or you buy a pre-made cover where it's made already in advance, and it tends to be cheaper. I think breaking in now is, I think you have to hand sell the book to the bloggers if you don't have a budget. So if you have that's the other thing. If you have a budget, like if you've got significant money to sink into it, then you could start with Facebook ads. You'd still want to do all the free things like the bloggers, or engage on Goodreads, and some of the other, there's some new promotion sites popping up. Book Plus Maine is one of them that's coming out right now, that's working its way up. BookBub now has a lot more reader engagement on their platform. You can write reviews, you can follow people, and not just follow them in terms of getting the featured deals, but you can actually follow readers and find your group who read similar interests. And I think that somebody starting out could use those social media platforms designed for readers in order to engage. But I think that the barrier to enter now is money. I just do. And I think it also depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to slowly put out some books, or quickly, but if your goal is to put the books out and build yourself a platform, build yourself a readership, so that you can eventually do this full time, I think that you have to be prepared for it to be slower. And I also think that if you're trying to do it in romance, it needs to be high concept. It needs to be like super easy to describe, I'm trying to think of an example, but bad boy romance, or I have a book that I describe as Fantasy Island meets Wedding Crashers. Yeah. So, but you have because you have to think about how to make it easy for others to promote you. How can it be easy for a blogger to promote you? What kind of visuals, what kind of words, and if you're going to pay for ads especially, how do you do that? I have a book, Shopping for a Billionaire's Fiancé, where she swallows the ring when he proposes. And so the ad copy wrote itself. He planned the perfect proposal, and then she swallowed the ring. And that got so much engagement, and it got free engagement. So it got shares on Facebook. It got people, if I were an Instagram person, which I'm not and I need to be, but mine would just be pictures of coffee. Then I would look at hashtagging and finding all of the free ways. But I really think that I'm grateful to my past self for doing this in 2012 and 2013. There's one other thing, though, on this topic. And this is a little bit of a soapbox topic for me. If you go to workshops or if you look at online courses about self-publishing, look at when the person who is selling this course or doing this workshop broke through. Because if they're trying to tell you how to break through, and they broke through, their breakout was in 2012 or 2011 or 2013 or even 2015, how relevant is that advice now? I mean, the basics: write your books, get good covers, get good snappy copy, make it so that it's high concept and easy to, have an elevator speech, all of that. But the other stuff, you'll see people out there promoting themselves or their advice. Just be careful,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When did they break out? Because the market conditions are totally different now.
Yep. And by now they have 20, 25 books they're sitting on.
Yeah, my
which
backlist.
is its own marketing machine.
Right,
Yeah.
right. My backlist is huge, and it sells, and it
Yeah.
sells because it's in series.
Yeah.
So that's different than if you're putting out 1 or 2 books at first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other questions? Ben.
It's really interesting hearing you talk about And it seems like everything you've talked about here would just seem like a different language to someone 10 years ago. And I'm just wondering, so the part of your job that is this staying ahead of, so it's like you've got regular publishers, you've got self-publishers that are far more experimental than regular publishers. And then it seems like your job in part is staying ahead of this already wildly experimental group of people.
Yes.
And is that part of your job? Is that fun or is it exhausting or is it both?
It's fun, and yes, it's both. But it's also, I used this phrase earlier when I was chatting with you and the development person. It's very hard to figure out the signal from the noise right now. Very hard. But that's sort of where my brain goes. I don't know if you know what Myers-Briggs is, the personality. I'm an INTJ. And so I am constantly looking at patterns and finding patterns in things. And so the fun for me is looking at what no one else has done. And then I look at it and go, well, they didn't do it because it's not going to work or because it's going to, waste a bunch of money. Or getting an idea like, oh, my readers would love it if I did X. And then going, okay, but that would be a lot of work and a lot of money for no real benefit. And once in a while I do it anyhow because the benefit's to me. But, staying ahead of the other experimental indies, I'm not always. It's kind of like you juggle all of this, you juggle all the information, you find what works for you, for your books, and then you try a couple things and it fails miserably. And once in a while that one thing works. And what I'm working on now is getting to that thing that works faster, or maybe not fast, but more streamlined, and trying to not compare. So there's a difference between looking at what people aren't doing and picking some things that work for me versus doing something because I think that comparatively speaking, I'm going to be ahead of someone. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to do it for the wrong reasons. So all of that, yeah. But there are people doing some wildly experimental things and selling books. And, the hardest part is, when do we write?
Yeah.
When do I got this total idea about 3 months ago for a standalone, which is really weird for me because I write series. And it just percolated. And last week, the whole thing came into my mind. And I don't have time to write it, but it's making me write it. And that's fun. That's the fun. Or having an idea where I'm like, oh, this is going to work. It's fun, but there's a point of overwhelm. Mm-hmm. And nobody can stay on top. That's the other thing. Nobody can do all of this. Nobody. I mean, I know indies who have created machines where they have like literally a COO and a CFO. Yep. They're out there and and they're really good at that. And that's not where I want to put my energy. I learned from starting that. But the other thing you have to also deal with in trying to stay up to date on what's going on in the indie world is that there are a lot of people doing things that work for their books but would never work for mine. And it's really hard because you start to watch them have all this success doing a certain thing. And then it's like, well, I don't think that would work for my books, but man, everybody else is doing it. So, yeah. I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah.
No, I think that's a really good point. Like, it also speaks to your point about the courses, just because that worked for you doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for everyone at this time doing what they want to do right now.
Yeah. I mean, one of the topics that comes up a lot in some of the author groups that I'm in is burnout.
Mm-hmm. Especially right now.
Big burnout from indie authors who had been putting out, 6, 10, 12 books, and I'm in that pack. And is that sustainable? I think the writing is sustainable. Mm-hmm. I think the publishing is sustainable if that's where your heart is. But all the other stuff.
Yeah.
all the other stuff. It's very exhausting. And the level of detail that we have to keep up with.
I think you are amazing, and
Thank you.
You have managed to do an incredible amount of work in both the artist and business side of things, and yeah, I'm really glad you're here and able to share your story with everyone.
Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful.
Thanks, Julia.
So we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to learn more about Julia, make sure to check out her blog post that she wrote for us for a KWL Wonder Woman series. A link to her post will be on her blog, which you can reach at kobowritinglife.com. So until next time, thank you for listening.
Welcome to the Kobo Writing Life Podcast, a podcast for writers about writing, publishing, and everything in between.